Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about gussets. In previous videos I have covered some basic gussets for adding volume to ponytails and shaping a head. So far we haven't covered underbelly gussets, so let's do that in this video. We'll use the body style from the Patterning Basics video. Gussets may seem daunting, but really once you get the hang of them, they're pretty simple, and only occasionally hair-pullingly frustrating. What we'll cover in this video is how to measure and pattern a gusset, and then I'll go over a few of my cheats for making good underbellies. To pattern a gusset, you'll need a tape measure and straight ruler. I think where a lot of people run into problems patterning and understanding gussets is that they tend to be a curved shape being added to a curved shape, like a head or a belly and chest, and it can be hard to envision and pattern it out. The first step is pretty easy. Take the pattern pieces that you're wanting to create a gusset for, and use your tape measure to measure around that edge. If I was doing a face, I would mark out the tip of the nose, the bridge, the forehead, and any other spots where I think I might want the width to change. When doing an underbelly, I mark the barrel of the chest, the armpits, and the base of the spine. My first tip is to mark the numbers on the pattern piece as you go around. If you lose your place with the tape measure, it can be kind of fiddly. You can find it again by lining the tape back up. You can also use these marks later on to plan out the width of the gusset. It's kind of annoying, so I recommend measuring twice, especially if you feel like maybe you've missed a bit or slipped with the tape measure. Here are all the points I've marked on the body. Again, you want to mark key points where the gusset will be changing shape or angle. We'll come back to those markings in a second. For now, take the paper that you're patterning on, a straight ruler, and draw a straight line that is as long as the lines you just measured on the other pattern piece. Mark out the numbers on this line too. If you leave the numbers on your pattern pieces, it can help you line them up later. At this point I have the body and inner legs drawn out. I also mark out where the inner legs will match up to on the body. I forgot to do that just now, so I'm just adding on the points for the gusset. Now to start drawing out the gusset. Deciding on the width is really going to depend on the plush and the shape that you're going for. Remember that the rest of the fabric will blow out when it's stuffed. You can see here with the fabric colours that the overall plush is wider than the gusset, so bear that in mind when deciding on your width. I make my shoulder points a little bit wider to help shape the shoulders and the upper legs. We've also got a nice fat tum and a nice curvy bum. I figured for this one we could start with a similar measurement to this prototype as it's a nice shape. This line we just drew is the centre line. I'm only going to draw one half of the pattern. Then later I'll fold the paper over and cut it out for an even piece, so all your width measurements should be halved. I want the belly to be as wide as the shoulder points for a nice fat tummy, so I'll mark the belly points at the same width. It's a little boxy tummy pattern, but say you were going for like a slinky cat with a skinny back end, you might decide to taper the belly down as it goes towards the hind legs. Back to the shoulders. I normally freehand a tapering line, using the markings as reference points. You can use a ruler as a guide if you want though. The 7cm mark is kind of where the neck part starts, so that's where the line starts to come up more sharply into the neck. Just roughing in the other side to give you an idea of how it'll look in the end. Now for the inner legs. This line needs to be curving inwards on both the gusset and the inner legs. I often make the inner legs a bit wider if I want thicker legs. You want the legs to be a part of the body, not sticking out awkwardly from the belly. These curved lines act as a dart to pull the leg inwards towards the body. Generally, the deeper the curve, the more the leg will be pulled in. To get an even curve, I'll often take my ruler and draw from the shoulder to the centre point of the belly, and then again to make an X shape. This gives us a guide. My original line does match up pretty well, but that's mostly down to several years of drawing patterns like this. It gets a lot easier the more you do it. We've now got this dart, and you can see how the inner leg will follow the curved line. We'll do the same for the back leg, and for this kind of gusset the bottom tapers off in a little triangle. It's pretty simple. Once the shape is down, we fold it in half and cut it out. This is what a lot of standard four-legged body gussets will look like. Depending on the design, there may be some changes, but most of my gussets look kind of like this, although mostly with neater cutting on those curves. Again, we can see how these pieces are going to fit together. The back looks a bit weird, but remember that the rear end of the gusset is curving up around the rear end of the body, so it will all fit when it's put together. Next we'll put together an actual body. I've already sewn up the spine and the inner legs. This is the normal order that I sew in, and I'm using a black thread so that it's nice and visible. I've chosen a different colour for the gusset too, so that we can see what's going on just a bit better. I do gussets a lot differently now to how I started, and I find that this method gives me better and more even results. I start at the shoulder point and pin it to the point where the inner leg ends. Pull back the seam allowance so that it's not caught in the pinning. With those points together, I can start actually pinning the seams together. I know some people don't like it when I do this, but I was taught in college to pin perpendicular to the seam for the most part, and I still do it even now because it's how I'm comfortable doing it. If you prefer pinning parallel to the seam, then do it that way instead. Repeat for the other side. I split the gusset into several parts and basically do one side and then the other. I find it way easier to check everything is even along the way like this. The seams from the neck and the inner leg match up perfectly. The weird pinning thing at the beginning does help with this. Neck done, we'll move on to the underbelly and continue the right side left side method. You've probably noticed that we're skipping the inner legs, and that's on purpose. I always leave them until last. I go from neck to belly to butt and then back to the armpits. The gusset's looking nice and even, and the next part is these armpits. What I do is turn the leg right side out and tuck it back into the body. This puts the seams together and it gets the leg fabric out of the way. And the Minky is rolling and does not want to behave for the camera. I'm pinning the inner leg side. It's fiddlier, but I prefer to sew the legs with this side on top. Hand sewing is probably a lot more accurate and easier on the patients, but I am lazy and I like to machine sew as much as possible, even when it's probably detrimental. Pull the leg back out and we can see that the gusset is pulling on it. When it's stuffed, it should pull these legs inwards. Now repeat this for the other 3 legs. A nice even gusset! Yay! Let's turn it and stuff it and take a look at the finished results. And then I'll show a couple of patterning cheats to help you out if your gusset is giving you trouble. This plush body looks really cute, nice and fat with cute little legs and a nice gusset. But what about when gussets are giving you trouble? Don't worry if you're looking at your gusset pattern and thinking what the fizzity-yuck next, because I do that a lot. This is why I always recommend prototyping plush and taking the prototype apart, because you can iron out any issues on the test pieces and then get a better understanding of how your pattern will work. This is a prototype pattern I've been working on with a more shapely butt. The gusset needs to be different to how I'm used to doing it, and I do have a little cheat for getting a good shape with prototypes. I've sewn the front legs and the belly because I understand that part of the pattern, but the back legs are annoying me, so I've left them open and stuffed the plush as normal. I've talked about this before for my patrons, but never videoed it, so here we go. I start by folding the raw edges of the pieces inside themselves. Then I start pinning the pieces in together. It's hard to describe the way I'm pinning. It's kind of like when you're putting hair grips in. I put the pin through the layers of fabric and then twist the angle around to lock the pieces together. I keep pinning and repinning until it's all even, and don't be afraid to use lots of pins to get a nice smooth line. Okay, so if there are any weird noises going on in this recording, it's because my cat has insisted on joining me in the blanket fort where I do my recording, and he is a fidgeter. Once it's all pinned, I take a pen. For most prototypes, I just use a Sharpie or something that's going to stick, but this is a video and I might have to do more than one take if this is a bad shot, so just for this I'm using a disappearing marker. I draw across the pinned seam line. Need to make sure that the ink is marking both the legs and the belly. Mark all along the seams and try not to leave any gaps. Well, there'll be gaps around the pinheads, but that should be okay, don't worry. I've marked over them again so they're a little bit easier to see, but once unpinned you should be left with a new seam line drawn on. Cut along these lines with some seam allowance and you should have new seam lines you can sew along. And here they are sewn, a nice blush. There are a few things I want to change for this prototype, the length of the back and the angle of the legs. Because this new butt pattern pulls the back legs in shorter than the other gusset, but the butt itself looks great, I really like it. Both of these gussets are great, the one on the right I definitely find easier to work with, but I do like this new butt. I do this a lot with prototypes and then take them apart again, and this helps me understand how the pattern is working and how I can apply the shapes to future patterns. Now what about splayed legs? If your plush is coming out trying to do the splits, chances are that the gusset darts aren't right and need to be a bit deeper. This is an old test plush, so not the best example because he's a bit skinny and weedy, but I'll demonstrate anyway on here. Now you could unstuff and redo the legs on the plush, but it's kind of time consuming and frustrating, especially if you've just spent a lot of time stuffing. So what I sometimes do, similar to what I just did with the pattern test, is to pin the legs into a new position. We tuck the extra fabric in that's been causing the splaying, and then I ladder stitch them into place. I go over twice to keep them nice and strong, and this is a really good fix for splayed legs. I really hope this video helped with gussets. They are annoying and they can feel complex sometimes, and they are complex. But taking it slow and testing and experimenting can really help, along with lots of practice. As always, let me know in the comments any thoughts and questions. Thanks for watching and goodbye!